Mr. Hickling, I see you've joined us.
Yes, I have. Good morning, all.
Good morning. We can hear you nice and clear. Thank you.
Excellent.
Mr. Smith, I see you've joined us. Still connecting, but you are here. Good morning, Mr. Smith. It looks like you've connected now. Can you hear us? Mr. Smith, I can see you on my screen. Are you able to hear? Are you able to hear us? I'm not sure if your audio connected. I don't believe it did. Good morning, Mr. Smith. It looks like you've connected. Can you hear us?
Good morning.
Good morning. We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Stevens.
Good morning.
We can hear you very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wilfredo, I think I see that you have joined us. Can you hear us? Looks like you.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Great.
Good morning. We'll be beginning the Transportation Disadvantage Local Coordinating Board public meeting in just a moment. Well, thank you so much for your patience and for bearing with us this morning.
Good morning and welcome to the Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board Annual Public Meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Jose Alvarez and I'm the mayor of the city of Kissimmee, and I'll be sharing this meeting today. Today's meeting is being conducted in a hybrid format, which means we have a physical in-person quorum of the members of this board here in this room, and other members of the board are joining us on Zoom. This meeting is being conducted this way in order to safely accommodate all attendees and also observe social distancing guidelines. We also have a team of folks working to ensure this meeting runs smoothly. Today's meeting was advertised on Metroplans Orlando's website, on social media, as well as through targeted emails. Now it's time for the Pledge of Allegiance. Today I'll ask Ms. Marilyn Baldwin to lead us in the pledge. With the exception of Ms. Baldwin, everyone in the Zoom, please keep your microphones muted. Those of you here in the room, if you're able to stand, please join me. Ms. Baldwin.
Good morning. Please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'll ask Ms. Lisa Smith to please call the roll to ensure we have a quorum present.
Good morning. All committee members joining us on Zoom today, I'm going to call your name first for the roll, and then I will go on to those that are in person. You can go on mute again once your name is called. Please make sure your video is on if possible so that we can confirm that it's you. You will find the unmute and video buttons on the bottom left side of your toolbar on the bottom of your screen. Please say here or present when your name is called. Marilyn Baldwin.
Present.
Mr. James Gresick. Mr. Norman Hickling.
Present.
Ms. Sharon Jennings. Dr. Levine Silverman. Mr. Bob Melia. I see Bob is coming in now, so he's present. Ms. Janae Oles.
Present.
Ms. Carla Radka. Mr. Wilfredo Races.
Present.
Mr. Calvin Smith.
Present.
Now I will move on to the members that are joining in person. Mayor Alvarez. Ms. Diane Arnold.
Present.
Mr. Chad Ballard.
Present.
Ms. Nika Berry.
Nika is en route.
Okay. Mr. Wayne Olson.
Present.
Ms. Joe Santiago.
Joe Santiago is en route.
Okay. Commissioner Uribe.
Present.
Ms. Alnita Witt.
Present.
Mr. Adam Zabritsky.
Present.
Mayor Alvarez, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Lisa. At this time, I will call Ms. Whittington for a few remarks. Ms. Whittington, you're recognized.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members and all who may be joining us online this morning and in person. We appreciate your patience and understanding today as we migrate from the world of virtual meetings into the hybrid meeting space. This is MetroPlan Orlando's first hybrid meeting, and it's being hosted not only off-site in order to be able to adhere to social distancing guidelines, but it's also being hosted virtually to allow as many people as possible to participate in this meeting. All attendees who are here in person are required to wear masks at all times. So members on Zoom, if you're unable to hear, please let us know by typing in the chat box, and we'll do our very best to make the necessary adjustments on this side. We ask that you please bear with us as we work through any technical difficulties that may arise. Today's meeting is accessible to the public via computer, tablet, or phone. Instructions on how to share public comments will be given when we get to that point on the agenda. A recording of this meeting can be accessed later on the MetroPlan Orlando YouTube channel. You'll find links to YouTube and to the meeting and agenda for today in the chat box, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Today's events will begin with the annual public meeting and conclude with a meeting of the Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board. The purpose of the annual public meeting is to receive input on unmet needs or other areas that relate to the local paratransit services. Members of the public will be given an opportunity to address this board. Both meetings have been properly noticed and advertised in accordance with the requirements of Florida's Government in the Sunshine Law. In addition, event notifications were emailed from MetroPlan Orlando directly to 1,534 Access Links riders. To facilitate the meeting today, the chairman will first recognize all attendees joining via Zoom who submitted electronic speaker cards in advance of this meeting. When called upon, speakers should use the raised hands feature that's located at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. You'll be invited to unmute your microphones to speak. If you're joining with phone only, please use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute and mute yourself. After all of the online speakers have made their comments, the chair will then invite members of the public who are in person. Finally, any comments received in writing via phone message will be summarized for the record. Each person wishing to speak will have 2 minutes to address the board. Again, please note that this is required by law, that this first meeting is for the purpose of getting input and documenting comments received from the public on unmet needs or other areas that relate to the local transportation services. These may be comments or suggestions for improving the service, complaints, and/or compliments. Members of the Access Links team are with us online and here in person today, and they are taking note of your concerns. Mr. Chairman, we are prepared to move to the public comment period.
Thank you, Ms. Whittington. Please proceed with those members of the public who are joining us online today that have submitted electronic speaker cards.
Mr. Chairman and members, we have received in advance 2 speaker cards for the meeting. The first is Mr. Jose Navarro. If you are present online, please raise your virtual hand using the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you're on the phone only, please use *9 to raise your virtual hand and staff will unmute your microphone. Marianne, is Mr. Navarro present?
I do not see Mr. Navarro raising his hand. We have one phone number. That phone number is not acknowledging that they are Mr. Navarro. I do not believe he is in the virtual room.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ms. Earlene Powell-Krosky. Ms. Krosky, if you are online, will you please raise your virtual hand? Marianne, is there a hand?
I do not see a hand at this time for Ms. Prosky.
Okay, moving along. Mr. Chairman, we have one person who is in person who submitted a card this morning, and she is with us, and that is Miss Alma Reese.
Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. I had some concerns. I do a lot of the public transportation. I do Access Links, I do Neighborhood Links, I do the buses, and I do the Sunrail. When I travel on the Neighborhood Links, they are really not servicing the public in the 12 o'clock hour. So I really plan my day either really early or after that because they sit at the sunrail for that extended period of time. And I was wondering as to why that is. I know that with the neighborhood links, that was my main concern. With the access links, they still have issues with the GPS not getting them to the actual location. It gets them really close to good service and the system, but it doesn't get them exactly to where they need to be. They sort of keep them going in different circles a lot of the time. Those are my concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. Mr. Chairman, this is the only in-person person who is here for comments. I think we are now ready to acknowledge anyone online that may have come today that did not submit a speaker card in advance. And we'll ask that Marianne would facilitate any hands that may be raised.
Yes, Ms. Whittington, Ms. Sheila Young has asked to speak, and I have unmuted her at this time.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I am Sheila Young, Amherst Avenue, Orlando, Florida. I want to commend Access Links for what they did through all of the difficult time. Their service continued, and it was just amazing how well it ran. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Marianne, are there any more hands that are raised?
No, Ms. Whittington, I don't see any more hands. However, we several members of our Zoom audience say that they were unable to hear the speaker in the room. I don't know. Perhaps you could summarize for us that comment, or perhaps we could allow her to talk again. But on the electronic side, we could not hear that lady.
Okay, she is actually leaving the room at the moment. And to summarize her comments, she was concerned. I'm sorry, she is going to make her comment.
Hello, everyone. My concerns were for the access links, the GPS system. That is a good system, but it doesn't get the drivers to the exact location. It takes them into lost circles. So I feel that system needs to be updated. Also, with the neighborhood links during the 12 o'clock hours, they sit at the sunrail for pretty much that whole hour. They're not servicing the community. So when I go out, I have to plan my day before the 12 o'clock hour or be somewhere for that 12 o'clock hour and know that I can make my way back home after that hour. So that is a concern for me as to why they're at the sunrail for that pretty much that whole hour. Those are my concerns.
And again, for those who may have had difficulty hearing, she also had submitted a written comment. So her comment was regarding Sunrail and the ability for Sunrail and links to be more synced in terms of the time around the 12 o'clock hour. It makes it difficult when traveling to try and schedule a ride at the 12 o'clock hour. And for the record, we did reach out to Ms. Reese for information about the actual Sunrail station so that Links will be able to follow up with you, and we will get that to them.
Lastly, Ms. Whittington, did we receive any comments by any other means, either mail, email, or phone messages?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we did not receive any phone messages, but we do have one additional email comment that was submitted. And this is from Ms. Pamela Mason. Dear representatives of paratransit transportation in the Central Florida area, if I did not receive transportation assistance from Access Links, I don't know what I would do. I am 62 years old, and prior to March of 2020, I regularly used the Links bus system. I have no family in the area. 4 years ago, I received a medical diagnosis, and during the initial stages of treatment, I had to sign up with Orlando Health ORMC for transportation. Unfortunately, they had a long waiting list for transportation. They suggested that I apply to Access Links. I did and was approved for transportation services with Access Links. My medical provider does not want me to travel by public transportation due to COVID. I work from home, so my transportation to work is not a factor currently. However, I have many medical appointments and I use the Access Link system. Without Access Link to support, how would I get to the hospital for tests and treatment? I shudder to think. I am grateful for Access Links. Without this service, I may have died from lack of access to treatment and testing sites that I have used during this past 4 years. And so she is basically saying that she's appreciative of Access Links' service.
Thank you so much for your comments, and your comments will be addressed. Thank you to everyone who took the time to attend the meeting today. We appreciate your addressing this board. Your comments have been recorded and made part of the official record. Access Link staff are here today, and they will also receive a copy of the comments recorded today. With that, this annual public meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
At this time, we will transition into our next meeting. Welcome to the Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Jose Alvarez, and I'm the mayor of the city of Kissimmee, and I'll also be sharing this meeting today. Today's meeting is being conducted in hybrid format, which means we have a physical in-person quorum of the members of this board here in this room, and other members of the board are joining us via Zoom. The meeting is being conducted this way in order to safely accommodate all attendees and also observe social distancing guidelines. Today's meeting was advertised as required by law and on Metroplans Orlando's website and social media, as well as through targeted emails.
Mr. Chairman and members, again, thank you for working with us during this hybrid meeting today. We do have a couple of changes to your agenda that I'd like to call to your attention. First, there was an inadvertent omission of your May meeting minutes from the items needed for your approval today. So when you get to action item 6A, the approval request is for the May and August minutes. Secondly, under item 7, presentations and status reports, Mr. David Darm was unable to be with us today. So we will work with Mr. Darm to have him to address this board early next year. There are no additional changes. So at this time, Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask Ms. Smith to confirm that we still have a quorum for this meeting. And for the record, we have been joined by Joe Santiago and Ms. Nika Berry.
Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum at this time.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to call Mrs. Marilyn Baldwin with a report from the last QATF meeting.
Excuse me, question. Do we need to approve the agenda? We didn't vote on it, Virginia.
Yes, the change,
Yeah,
yes.
so I'd like to file a motion to approve the agenda with the changes and adding the month of May.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please, if you're in person, say aye, and if you're on Zoom, raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed. Thank you.
For the record, the second was Ms. Nika Berry. And now, Ms. Baldwin, if you're able to unmute your microphone, we're ready for your QATF report.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Whittington, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Quality Assurance Task Force met virtually on Tuesday, October 27th, 2020. We recommended approval of our 2021 QATF meeting schedule. We also have a recommendation for the TDLCB membership that I will present to this board later on in the agenda. The committee recommends approval of the annual operating report and the annual expenditure report. There are recommendations from the TD eligibility application. The review committee was expected to be presented at our last meeting, but was postponed at the request of Access Links. In other words, the TD eligibility committee's report was expected to give you a finished product of our draft application, but at the request of Access Links, we are postponing that. Finally, we received a CTC update from Mr. Norm Hinkling. I understand that his update today will include a status report on the TD eligibility application. However, because the item was pulled from the QATF agenda without action, I felt strongly that the QATF needed to receive a full presentation of the resulting application before bringing it to this board for final approval. And I'm happy to speak more about this later if needed. The next QATF meeting is scheduled for January 26, 2021. Mr. Chairman, that is my report.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to item 5, public comments on action items. We will now hear public comments on today's action items. Do we have people who want to speak to any action items? If so, please use the raise hand function found at the bottom of your screen or by pressing *9 on your phone keypad. When we call your name, the host will unmute your microphone. You will see a button pop up that says the host wants to unmute you. Accept the prompt to activate your microphone. We ask that you provide your name and address for the record. Please hold your comments to 2 minutes or less. Are there any comments at this time?
Marianne, do we have any raised hands at this time?
No, Ms. Whittington and Mr. Chair, I do not see any raised hands on the Zoom side.
Is there anyone in person today who wishes to make a comment or on any action of the action item?
Mr. Chairman, there are no public comments in person.
Are there any written comments that were submitted before the meeting?
We did not receive any written comments on any of the action items.
All right, now we'll move into item 6, which is action items, the approval of the minutes. As a reminder, this request is for the May 14 and August 13 minutes. During this actions today, I will look for a motion for an in-person person and a second from our members joining us via Zoom. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, but I thought we approved them already. So moved, Uribe.
We have a motion by Commissioner Uribe. Do I have a second?
I second it. Dr.
Second
Linda
by
Silverman.
Marilyn.
Both
It will
of
be
us.
Dr. Linda for the record.
We have a second by Dr. Linda Levine.
Silverman.
Is there any other comments on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion passed. Moving on to item B, proposed 2021 TDLCB meeting schedule. Ms. Whittington, you're recognized.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman and members. You have
in your agenda packet a list of the draft 2021 board and committee meeting schedule, which will be presented to the Metro Plan Orlando Board for final adoption at their meeting next week. I call attention to your meeting in November of next year. It will be on November 18th, which is a week later than normal because of the Veterans Day holiday would fall on that same date. So we've moved it to the 18th. And so I just wanted to call that to your attention.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting schedule?
So moved, Uribe.
Motion by Commissioner Uribe. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Silverman, Dr. Linda Silverman.
Second by Ms. Diane Arnold.
Okay.
Any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion passed. All right, we're moving on to item C, acknowledgement of the AOR. Ms. Whittington, please present the item.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman and members. The annual operating report is a requirement of this board to submit to the Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged each year. Access Links has submitted this report. It has been reviewed by the commission and it is presented today for not only your acknowledgement, but also authorization for the chair to execute the cover sheets.
Do I have a motion to acknowledge the AOR and authorize the chair to execute the cover sheets?
So moved, Uribe.
Motion by Commissioner Uribe,
Second.
And that second is from Ms. Diane Arnold. And those members who are joining us on Zoom, if you will please unmute your microphones when it's time to vote for the record.
we have a motion and we have a second. Any other discussion on this motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion passed. Action D, acknowledgement of the AER. Ms. Whittington?
And Mr. Chairman, the AER is the annual expenditure report. Again, this is an annual requirement for us to submit to the Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged by September 15th. That transmission letter is presented in your agenda packets today for acknowledgement and confirmation that we did submit that by the deadline.
Thank you, Ms. Whittington. Do I have a motion to acknowledge transmission of the AER?
So moved, Uribe.
Motion by Commissioner Uribe,
We have a second in the room by Mr. Wayne Olson.
if there's no discussion on this motion, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Hearing none, motion passed. Item E, QATF membership recommendation. Ms. Marilyn Baldwin, you are recognized to present this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The QATF reviewed membership applications from 2 individuals, and we also received a letter of interest from Ms. Nika Berry, who is currently serving in the role of Citizens Advocate, non-system user. Ms. Berry's initial appointment was to fill the balance of a term left vacant when a former LCB member resigned. Today, we are happy to recommend Ms. Berry be reappointed to a full 3-year term, and I make this recommendation in the form of a motion that Ms. Mika Berry be appointed to a full 3-year term on the TDLCB.
Thank you. Do I have a
Second,
motion?
Uribe.
Dr. Silverman, second that.
We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passed.
Aye.
And Mr. Chairman, as you are moving to the next section, I just wanted to
call attention to, we did have two very good candidates who also submitted applications, and those have been given to our Community Advisory Committee liaison for consideration for other opportunities within Metro Plan Orlando.
Thank you very much, Livingston, and thank you for all of you that applied and are willing to serve. Moving on to item 7, presentation and status reports. For today's meeting, we have 3 presentations. We ask that you hold your questions until the end of each presentation. To facilitate questions, we'll be using the raise hand feature to recognize committee members who are joining us via Zoom who wish to speak. I'll call on those members first and then recognize those of you who are in person. I'm sure you're all used to this by now, but if you have joined us on the phone only without the video screen, please use *6 to mute and unmute your line. Please use *9 to raise your virtual hand so the meeting host can see that you wish to be recognized. Item 8, presentation on revision to Orange County Code. Our presenter today is Ms. Alisa Barber Torres, Chief Planner with Orange County's Transportation Planning Division.
Good morning, everyone. Alyssa Barber Torres with the Orange County's Transportation Planning Division. On behalf of Orange County staff, appreciate Commissioner Uribe's invitation to address you today about some Orange County projects of interest and to hear your input as well. So for the presentation today, I'll be providing these updates. Happy to hear your input on these current projects. First, I'll start by defining micromobility devices, which are an important component of this effort, and recap recent county regulatory actions, and summarize key provisions of Orange County Code amendments recently adopted by Commissioner Uribe and the rest of the Board of County Commissioners to improve pedestrian safety and ADA in site development and in public rights of way. And I'll outline the next steps for both projects. To start, micromobility devices are defined in Florida statutes as motorized transportation devices reserved online for point-to-point trips. Of course, many of you, perhaps on the way to the meeting, saw motorized scooters, motorized bicycles in downtown Orlando or in other parts of the city of Orlando or at UCF. These are the devices we're talking about. They travel no more than 20 miles per hour by statutory definition, and they also exclude scooters and bikes that are owned by individuals and that aren't part of a shared system. And generally speaking, micromobility riders have the same rights and duties of bicycle riders in statutes. Orange County's attention was focused on this issue when a scooter vendor began operating in the International Drive area in August 2019 and was followed quickly by another one a few months later. The Board of County Commissioners adopted a countywide moratorium in March 2020 that restricted these devices until January in the unincorporated area to allow staff the time to develop appropriate regulations in partnership with the community. Unfortunately, the county received the notice of intent to file a lawsuit by a micromobility provider, and weighing the risk, the cost, the reduced traffic that unfortunately was seen countywide as a result of the pandemic and the unfortunate circumstances, and the temporary nature of this moratorium. In July, the board rescinded the moratorium, but directed staff to move forward on the review of issues. So to do so, staff has been conducting an extensive public outreach process, including a number of community organizations, business groups, stakeholders, citizen advisory boards, and UCF and other local agencies. And this includes links. We thank Tamika Monterville for arranging that meeting and helping that coordination. And we have also had conversations and coordination meetings with several municipalities, Apopka, Maitland, Orlando, and Winter Park. And some of the groups we have spoken with are listed on this slide: the Disability Advisory Board, several International Drive groups, Hunters Creek, Pine Hills, in the Sustainability Advisory Board of Orange County. Also, the staff held a micromobility industry forum to be able to hear from scooter and bike providers about some of the issues and needs that they had if operating in Orange County. We were fortunate to have 5 companies participate, They did confirm services would not have stations for parking these devices or require helmets in response to staff safety concerns. They did let us know that they plan to have detailed safety education, COVID-19, and emergency complaint response protocols in place. They asked for staffing flexibility and the ability to leave devices in place and not pick them up nightly. And they noted that most users want to ride where the speed limit is 35 miles per hour or less, and I'll touch on that further in a moment. We'll have another meeting of this groups tomorrow to obtain further input. Now, turning to our community stakeholders, we heard pretty strongly that there was not an interest by residents outside of urban areas in accessing micromobility devices. They had similar concerns about parking, scooters left near business entrances, scooters left on the sidewalk that may block pedestrian access. They did not want scooter riders on the sidewalks, and they thought that the handling of enforcement of this parking behavior and clutter may be an issue. Turning now to the stakeholder input we heard from International Drive specifically, they had a number of additional concerns. They were concerned about liability for the crashes on their private property, clutter and parking near business entrances, and the fact that they would, in theory, have to have parking spaces or some ability for users to leave devices on their property. They were concerned about bonding, insurance, and other financial aspects of company operations. They were concerned about county enforcement of parking and the safe operation and fines and fees for behavior that was not in line with those regulations. They asked about geofencing, which is a term of art that involves carving out areas of operation to restrict operations in those zones. And they want them potentially for areas of International Drive or their properties specifically. They thought restricting operation on International Drive and on sidewalks was key. And they were concerned about aspects of I-Ride trolley ridership, of course, an important transit service provided in the community there, and sanitation and safety during COVID-19. When we look at the operation of micromobility devices in particular, the county has had to consider the fact that we have some very diverse development patterns throughout Orange County. And in general, our traffic volumes and our roadway speeds tend to be higher in the county than in the city of Orlando, where micromobility devices operate today. We're also assessing the suitability of the county's infrastructure and the sidewalk width to safely accommodate a number of users, or micromobility in particular, and also the relationship of to transit service and stops to make sure that if micromobility devices go forward in areas of the county, that they complement link service and don't prevent access to link services through clutter and some parking issues. From a safety and accessibility perspective, of course, we're concerned about device speeds and interactions with other roadway users that may cause injury. The fact that helmets would not be supplied or required, which potentially may be a concern. ADA concerns from device clutter and other improper parking concerns. So these options were presented at the Board of County Commissioners work session on October 27th. The option to not regulate devices and to allow them to operate subject to the statutory provisions in place, which were outlined a moment ago, to establish regulations, say a one-year pilot program as the City of Orlando and UCF had been operating, or addressed through some permanent regulation. But it would also involve defining some operational standards for these devices and potentially limit them to designated target areas, which may include iDrive, where they're operating now, of course, subject to community input, or the area around UCF's main campus, where UCF had been operating a program on their campus that was suspended due to COVID-19, or potentially restricting in areas of Orange County where infrastructure and other needs show that they may not be safely operated. So turning now to code amendments that were recently made, I'll follow up with the next steps on both projects in just a moment. The Orange County completed Orange County code amendments addressing sections that were not updated for many years. We attempted to simplify infrastructure standards that are now in multiple chapters to eliminate redundancy, implement new federal and state standards and best practices since code adoption, and implement related county projects, which include our sustainability plan, the Walk, Ride, Thrive pedestrian safety program, and the county's ADA transition plan for compliance and needs in public rights of way. To develop and revise code amendments, we had significant stakeholder input from some of the groups listed here, several county advisory boards, including the Disability Advisory Board, and we appreciate Diane Arnold making that opportunity available to us. We spoke with the county's Development Advisory Board, which advises on land development code-related matters. I had several meetings with them, outreach to 15 professional associations in the design, engineering, construction, and pedestrian safety realm. We held meetings with the developers of Orange County in a setting we have called the Developers Forum, and presented at a Greater Orlando Builders Association meeting for more targeted feedback. The changes we have made to Orange County Code in general are summarized here and listed with the ordinance number for reference. The first is we improve the what the county calls maintenance of traffic. It's a term of art that says when a construction activity is taking place on a development site or on a roadway, a maintenance of traffic plan ensures that the traveling public can still move through those areas safely. And so we addressed it for walking, biking, and transit users. We made changes to site development standards, including access management, sidewalks, and other provisions. We updated subdivision standards and student housing requirements. We implemented recommendations of the county's ADA transition plan, which did include a code audit of changes that needed to be made. We implemented FDOT standards and also provisions of the Florida Accessibility Code of the Florida Building Code, which address site development and access to adjacent transit stops. So I will take you quickly through the changes by chapter, again, understanding that there's a lot of detail here. First, we revised the pedestrian facility standards for commercial, quote unquote, big box stores like Walmarts and things like that, that are found in Chapter 9, which is our building code. We removed the standards there to be able to defer to one common section of the code for pedestrian accommodations, again, to eliminate the redundancy that we had in the past. Looking now at Chapter 21, which is the highways, bridges, and miscellaneous public places. This is basically right-of-way standards. We updated references to include all applicable and current FDOT manuals and ADA regulations. We strengthened the accessibility standards for crossings that take place in the right-of-way to make sure they were restored in a safe manner. We added those maintenance of traffic references and new standards for railroad crossings, which were an item of concern in the past, and required restoration of any sidewalk, driveway, or stable surface to 48 inches wide instead of the current 36 inches to reflect recommended standards in the federal public right-of-way accessibility guidelines. Those maintenance of traffic standards during construction now reflect current FDOT and ADA standards. They require that if construction is taking place, the affected party has to ensure that pedestrian and bicycle facilities match the current level that's provided. So if there's, say, a bike lane in place or a sidewalk in place, it's not enough to simply close that access. You have to ensure that there is a route that is equivalent to the facilities they have today. We also address transit and school facilities with more detail and the ability to revoke a maintenance of traffic permits for non-compliance to ensure that those are implemented. Turning now to Chapter 30, which is the county's planning and development standards, we have a new section for pedestrian accommodations that consolidates the standards in multiple chapters, adds additional certifications by engineers of record and other compliance measures. And we also took standards that previously applied to the county's alternative mobility area, which is a concurrency exception area that promoted multimodal travel and site development. And we have now, through the actions of the board in updating the transportation impact fees, applied them to a new and larger urban area, which is the beige area you see depicted on this map. So what that means is these pedestrian safety and accessibility standards now apply and are enhanced in a larger area of Orange County. Other changes within that chapter include increasing the required sidewalk width by 1 foot countywide to match FDOT standards, requiring subdivisions to connect sidewalks to the county's network, which is the subject of some concerns in the past, providing that if a developer chooses not to construct sidewalks, that they make a payment in lieu of construction that is closer to the county's actual cost of providing those sidewalks to ensure that there are no gaps. and also addresses lots of record, which is previously existing lots, just to ensure that they are consistently applied, and retains the requirements we had that separate pedestrians from vehicles and current practices in place. Also in Chapter 30, we updated access management and driveway standards. Of course, the community knows that driveways are key points of conflict between people walking, using transit, and vehicles. So these are a key aspect of what we're trying to do to ensure safety. So we completely overhauled our standards to match FDOT standards, tried to limit the number of driveways and coordinate access, allow access to be reconfigured if a site is being redeveloped based on analysis of safe movements and standards today. And it creates a requirement for ladder, or what is technically called special emphasis crosswalks, across driveways if they are accessing arterial or collector roadways. And this just establishes a safer zone for pedestrians and a better indication of their presence and needs. And this is a standard now countywide. From an accessibility perspective, again, as noted previously, we now have a 48-inch wide continuous pedestrian access route required on sidewalks, which is an increase from 36 inches. The county's code now specifies in new construction that developers must provide 2 curb ramps per intersection quadrant instead of 1 shared ramp that is not as well aligned with crosswalks. We require connection from accessible entrances to transit stops, again, an existing provision of the Florida Accessibility Code that we're trying to highlight a little more to ensure those connections are well made. And we restricted the use of bricks or pavers in that minimum 5-foot sidewalk width. And that's to ensure that those surfaces over time maintain a stable and accessible and safe surface. And we also, again, required those thermoplastic crosswalks in areas of pedestrian activity. Turning now to the county's subdivision regulations, of course, the subdivision regulations are enhanced first by requiring additional information and identification of ADA needs when plans are submitted, and revises the submittal to ensure that pedestrian access and technical clarifications are made. We also improve the sidewalk standards for single-family subdivisions, again, that 1 foot wider width per FDOT, and connectivity and other provisions also made in Chapter 30. From a connectivity and accessibility standpoint, we have brand new standards that ensure that when the county approves on-street parking, which is a feature we're seeing more and more in planning areas like Horizon West and new development in the county, that they will include access aisles and marked spaces for accessible parking. And again, this reflects standards in the public right-of-way accessibility guidelines at the federal level, which shortly may become part of ADA regulation. We require now pedestrian access for subdivision walls in exchange for open space credits to ensure that there is more connectivity and points of access for those walking or moving through a community. And we also specified that cross access must be provided if you're a non-residential development near arterial roads, which of course are some of our widest and most traveled roads in Orange County. And then finally, turning to our zoning code, we revised those pedestrian accommodation standards. We updated standards as well for special zoning overlays and districts in the county to make sure that our standards are better throughout. We changed and updated the standards relating to planned developments, which are developments that tend to have a mix of uses or a more site-specific development based on needs of that development or uses that are less common. We also updated standards for accessibility and ADA relating to outdoor dining, code waivers, site plan deficiencies, and other needs. So very comprehensive throughout that chapter. In particular, the multifamily and student housing standards have been changed. Right now, there is a new ability for single family and multifamily projects to share access points, which was previously prohibited in the code and made pedestrian travel and access in general more difficult. We require a new student housing mobility plan to ensure that pedestrian safety, transit use, bicyclists are all well provided for in these developments, and requiring that pedestrian access for screen walls to avoid the situations you see here at the bottom of the slide, which are unfortunately too often found in the county today. Relative to special planning areas, again, Horizon West, one of the most busy and highest level of development activity in Orange County right now. The last estimate I saw said about a third to 40% of the county's development is happening there at any given time. We have comprehensively updated the standards for the individual villages in the town center, which is intended to act as like a new Horizon West downtown. So those pedestrian standards include the 2 curb ramps per quadrant, the 5-foot sidewalk minimum, walkways with crosswalks, the 48-inch continuous route, no pavers, crosswalk markings, and the other provisions referenced previously, including the on-street parking, on-street loading zones to ensure safer access, ADA retrofits when connecting to the county's network, and other accessibility requirements. So finally, to conclude with some next steps, and again, would like to hear your input on these items. The micromobility device ordinance the county has in development will receive another work session in January 2021. We'll be doing additional public outreach, including advisory board meetings and the forum I referenced a moment ago, and doing a county analysis of the transportation network. Of course, when we spoke with the board last month, they had a number of concerns about safety, pedestrian interactions, ADA accessibility, and a host of features that I summarized a moment ago. So the county's doing more detailed analysis to determine if and how micromobility can operate safely. Looking at the county's roads and sidewalks in more detail, because they may not be as conducive to micromobility as the city's roadways. Looking at crash data in more detail to help determine if there are target areas for safe operations, and looking at that in more detail using the Signal 4 database that Metroplan Orlando, of course, is a major partner in providing. And looking at the traffic volumes and other safety factors as we continue to get the public's input as to whether or not micromobility is appropriate in the county and where. In terms of the code amendments, as I mentioned, the Board of County Commissioners adopted last month. They are now in effect. We have completed additional outreach to professional associations to advise them of the changes. We held a staff training and another developers forum in November to let the public know and answer any questions about these changes in effect. We've provided notification for the county's website and are conducting other outreach and training that may be recommended by stakeholders. So with that, I'm happy to provide any additional detail on any of these items. And again, happy to hear your input on the code amendments and micromobility devices in Orange County. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. First, I will start with those members that are here online via Zoom or on their phone. If they have any question of Ms. Torres, if so, please use the raise hand button and unmute yourself when recognized.
Mayor Alvarez, this is Myra, right next to you. Do you mind if I give a comment on why I asked Ms.
I'll come back with the comments to those members that are present. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Alvarez. I was asking him if I could kind of explain how this all came to fruition. We had this come up recently in the county commission where we're looking at the scooters, and we all know, and through our respective careers, we've heard of individuals who find these to be hindering access to sidewalks. They're not very responsible where they are. And another major concern for myself and a lot of my colleagues is unincorporated Orange County, which we're talking, Orange Blossom Trail, Cimarron Boulevard, all of these roads that aren't technically in the city of Orlando. Knowing, for instance, for me, what was very important about this is Orange Blossom Trail has one of the highest pedestrian fatalities. We do now have crosswalks, but imagine incorporating 20-mile-an-hour scooters on top of all of that in this. So my reasoning on this was not very favorable. I can understand in certain areas, like the city of Orlando has a pilot program, but outside of like UCF or concentrated areas, I would be cautious. And also the burden that it adds to law enforcement, in addition, to have to now start covering these, but also how conducive is it for our folks who have to travel, using our public sidewalks and public access and those kind of things. So I really asked her to please come here so you guys could see what we're seeing. And really, as much as we think about things, there's much more that you think about and know that could give insight to help us as a county make a better decision on this. And that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any members serving on online or on the phone that has any questions, please raise your hand.
Marianne, do we have any hands on Zoom?
Yes, we do have one hand from Ms. Marilyn Baldwin.
I thank you for this presentation. I have to say that as a citizen with a disability, I'm not sure I'd be comfortable trying to navigate and use mobility along with all of these devices. I'm, listening to this and I would have concerns about safety for our residents who are mobility impaired, along with the users of these devices.
Marilyn, anyone else has any questions that's online?
We do not have any other hands raised online, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions from the board members here present?
Holding the button, okay. So I just wanted to ask if we could, hi, this is Joe Santiago. I wanted to ask if we could receive this PowerPoint by email. I would like to share it with the rest of my mobility development team and see if anybody has any comments from my team.
Yes, we're happy to do that.
Anyone else has any questions here in person?
Chad Ballard. I guess the whole thing, I've seen these in the past, right around, I guess it's just designed just to be another alternative to transportation for, for the people and so forth. Is that the reason why they brought them about, or is it just more of a, because there was a demand or they were using them down iDrive? Just trying to figure out what the history was for it, why they started those.
Ms. Dory?
Sure, I'm happy to answer that question. And I know there was a fade out just a moment. So if I don't get to a point that you made, please let me know. In International Drive, our understanding is that the companies went there to operate because of course, the high level of tourist activity and interactions there. The statutory changes gave them the ability to operate, throughout the state, although the local governments do have the ability to regulate to some extent. And so they just went and talked to the county, I think briefly, but then went there and just started operating. So that was the challenge that we had because we did not have any regulations in place for safe and compatible operations. And that's the analysis that we're doing now. So I appreciate the comments. I'm looking away because I'm noting them very carefully for our public outreach summary. And again, happy to answer any additional questions or provide further information.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before you move on, I just wanted to note for the record, Alyssa, that was Joe Santiago with FDOT who requested the PowerPoint be submitted to her, and we will accommodate that request.
Thank you.
Yeah, and before we finish this section, I'll give you my comments. I've done some traveling throughout the State of the Union in different meetings, and when it comes to scooters, I've seen nightmares. I've talked to local electeds and local business owners and regular residents in those areas as I've traveled, and nothing positive has been said. I've seen nightmares at night of a lot of the younger generation with a little bit more to drink than we would like to see them do, and riding in those scooters in the middle of the street, and it's really unsafe. This was tried, they tried to bring that idea into the city of Kissimmee, and we do not allow that in the city of Kissimmee. We actually have zoning and the restrictions against those type of transportation. So hopefully if the county continues to move forward they're aware and they listen to those of you that have your concerns on the safety. Again, Ms. Torres, thank you so much for this great presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, now we're moving to item B, the 2045 MTP preview of the coast visibility plan. Mr. Alex Troger, you're recognized, sir.
Great. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the TDLCB. This morning, I'm going to present to you a draft preview of our 2045 cost feasible plan. We kicked off our long-range planning process a little over 2 years ago. And I have made a presentation, I believe about 6 months ago to this group, and we talked goals and objectives at that time, which really guided the planning development process. We started, looking at goals. I'm trying to advance here. Just give me 1 second. So I take control of the screen. There we go. I apologize about that. So like I said, goals and objectives are really where we started from, and that's a key process, key element of the long range planning process, visioning. And our 2045 plan is guided by these 5 goals and objectives that really focus on bringing to the forefront of our metropolitan planning process, health, emphasizing safety, and really more than ever focusing on access to opportunity, improving connectivity, and providing reliable choices for all transportation users. So, like I said, 2 years in the study process. About a year ago, though, we kicked off our public participation process. Started off with, a really strong in-person approach. With the pandemic, we pivoted and really focused on interacting and following through with our public participation plan using virtual tools and strategies. But even, across the tools, what we heard was all of our goals are important and almost equally as important as we surveyed them through public opinion research and checked to get back against, some of our previous surveying. But there was a recognition throughout our planning process that took place across the past 24 months that the pandemic, did provide, a shifting of goals, a shifting of what's important. And I think we can all acknowledge that, the focus pre-pandemic, there was a lot of safety, access, reliability. During the pandemic, some of our surveying showed, more of a focus on health, economy, things that are top of mind, during these times. So that's evidence in our planning process. But across the board, what was constant was there was strong support for more transit, more frequency, and more access to more destinations. And of course, the use of high technology solutions to improve congestion along and at intersections throughout our region. This plan, and I know I mentioned this, in previous presentations, really was a different end in mind, and it was a different focus. This was not a roads-based plan. It wasn't just about congestion and adding lanes, adding, widening projects to our transportation system. It was really about identifying the needs, identifying opportunities, for all of our transportation users from today and those into the future. So as we look at the output, the findings of our long-range planning process, you'll see less focus on road widening, more focus on filling in gaps, providing improved accessibility, providing additional bicycle and walking conditions, and really providing that infrastructure to do that safely, to improve health in some of our other goal areas. But as important element of the long range planning process, another important element is in a key federal requirement is identifying cost feasible projects. So we have to vision to understand our vision, our desires, what's most important, but we also have to, at the end of the day, identify projects, what we can afford based on our regional vision and desires, and based on our financial forecast, and we're looking at existing funding sources, as part of these following the federal guidelines here. our plan is $25.7 billion. That's from 2026 to 2045. So in the next 25 years, over $26 billion will be spent. As it relates to Metro Plan Orlando and our authority as a metropolitan planning organization, the rest of my presentation is going to focus really on those federal and state and local funds, acknowledging that our toll system does provide significant investment in infrastructure to our region, but that's not what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of my presentation. So as we look at those federal, state, and local funds, almost $13 billion of investment over the next 20 years. You can see about 8 categories on this slide here. You'll see state roads and local, those are just kind of broad groups. But as we look at the projects list and the type of investments, the types of projects that are in those state roads and local categories, they are multimodal. There's complete streets and sidewalk and trail and improved intersection, improved accessibility projects are in there. They're just grouped in those categories because they're on the state road system or on the local road network. But don't let those chart labels mislead you. We really do have a robust multimodal plan here. This funding also considers our board's funding policies. So as we take a little deeper dive into how we're spending our funds, through our public participation process, through our scenario planning process, and through the needs assessment that we went through, we identified some other funding programs that align our board's goals and objectives to transportation investment. So really getting us from need and opportunity to accomplishing the performance targets that we've set for ourselves. So we're spending over about $20 million annually to retime signals throughout the region, getting as much in optimizing our existing system as much as possible. We also have identified $250,000 a year for autonomous vehicle, connected vehicle, shared and electric vehicle demonstration projects. So that's going to be managed by our systems management and operations advisory group. But that program is going to allow them to think creatively, think high technology in solving some of our transportation challenges through innovative practices. So we see that as a great opportunity for our local partners to really advance the local system. As it relates to active transportation, our school mobility program supplements FDOT's Safe Routes to School program. So $1 million annually to provide safer and more accessible walking conditions to all of our school children, with a focus on our elementary aged children. We're also spending $1 million a year, $20 million over the next 25 years on filling critical sidewalk gaps. So that was new to this planning process. Previous long-range plans focused primarily on identifying those widening projects. This plan is really about filling in the gaps. We've matured as a region. Our transportation system is somewhat built out, and there's a desire to think more strategically and provide those other and solve for some of those other goal areas, not just capacity and throughput. And that's what you're seeing here in these funding allocations. To support our government partners, we're spending $1 million annually to conduct special studies. We've done a few of these already. We conducted one actually this past year that I managed, where we helped the city of Belle Isle and Orange County work through a couple roads like Hoffner and a couple other key facilities locally. So we're going to continue that. It takes our long-range planning into our short-term budgeting process. We're also allocating $300 million for our local road widening program. So these are federal and state funds that traditionally would be used on the state highway system that we're providing to our local partners so they can improve capacity on those local networks. We saw the need, and we're trying to, where permissible, provide funds, to help our local partners, serve those challenges. And we're also, following our board's policy, we're able to use up to 30% of our district dedicated revenue funds for premium transit operations. This is our first long-range plan that encapsulates that, and we'll use those funds in the latter years of the plan. So as we're developing the cost feasible plan, it is a federally regulated process. So there are certain aspects and requirements that we have to accomplish. But as we start piecing together the cost feasible plan, it's about needs and it's about revenues. And we identified needs through a really comprehensive and a holistic process this time around. But what's most important is finishing what we've started. As we look to the future, we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of today. And that's what this long-range planning process really encapsulates. So it's committing what's in our 5-year plan, our transportation improvement program, and then working beyond that. As I mentioned in my previous slides, where we have statutory availability, flexibility, we are flexing our federal funds, aligning with our goals, our board's policy and objectives, and following their emphasis areas. But another aspect, kind of key element of the long-range planning process, and to show that complete transportation picture, we include local projects and toll-funded projects, as I mentioned early in my presentation, but we include those by reference. Our board does not have direct jurisdiction over locally funded, 100% locally funded projects and toll-funded projects. So we recognize those roles and responsibilities as part of the long-range planning process, but we also don't want to lose sight that those are critical elements of the transportation system, and we have to understand those impacts locally and at a larger interregional movement aspect. So those are some ground rules. Most important takeaway from this slide is we're finishing and completing what's most important, our committed projects, those in the transportation improvement program. But what can we afford? So I talked about how much money and how we intend to spend those funds. In my next few slides, I'm just going to roll through some of our cost feasible project lists. Not all funds are created equal, especially the federal and state funds. But where we have flexibility, like I said, we're spending it. In other cases, funds have to be spent on certain projects on certain systems. And that's the case here for the interstate highway and strategic intermodal system. As it relates to funds, $4.4 billion over the next 25 years. And these are funding projects, like I said, on Interstate 4, but also this is where our region's truck parking needs will be addressed through these types of funds. As we look at project highlights, we have the I-4 Ultimate project, cost feasible. We know we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel of that project, but from Kirkman to 434, that's cost feasible. But based on the financial plan for that project, we're showing revenues and costs, through the life of our plan based on FDOT's financial plan for availability payments. Base cost feasible are the other segments, the Northern Ultimate configuration in Seminole County to the Volusia County line, as well as the southern leg, Kirkman South to the Osceola Polk County line, all cost feasible based on our financial assumptions here. On the national and state highway system, this is our most multimodal list of all of them. And all these projects actually are on the state highway system. So, if it has a state SR in front of it, these are those projects. And they really does include all project types, from complete streets and safety improvements to focusing on improving reliability and operational conditions using technology. And there are also some traditional widening projects on this list, but almost $2.6 billion over the next 25 years. And that's going to fund almost 50% of all of our funding needs, 244 projects and a couple partially funded projects in the latter years of the plan. Couple highlights of these projects. Our number one priority in this category is actually John Young Parkway, Pleasant Hill to Portage Street. That's a widening project going to 6 lanes, and it also includes an urban interchange or a flyover, which will improve the accessibility in some of those key intersections. On this list, like I said, all types of projects. A couple other highlights of the Complete Streets project on 434, and a couple Orange County projects. 535 in the kind of tourism area, where that's a complete streets, but also an operational project, just given some of the reliability challenges and need to actively monitor situations there, as well as the Silver Star Road, State Road 438, complete streets project on the west side of town, and in downtown Orlando, the Robinson Street complete streets project is also cost feasible as part of this plan. As I mentioned before, we're spending almost $300 million to help our local government partners advance some of their capacity needs. And we're able to fund with that amount of money 23 local projects. Like I said before, these projects and funds typically would not be funded in previous plans. So this is definitely a benefit here to help our local governments advance some of those congested, constrained areas. A couple highlights throughout the region. I'm not going to go through them all, but Table 10 of our cost feasible plan does provide the list of those projects. Complete streets. So these are federally funded projects following through with our board's urbanized area policies, $203 million for the next 25 years, and we're funding 14 projects. Again, these are projects that emphasize reliability, improving transit, improving walking, cycling conditions, but also improving reliability and safety at intersections. Throughout the region, again, projects really throughout the region. These were evaluated using a holistic set of criteria that really focused on addressing and accomplishing our goals and objectives. Another category that we traditionally didn't show in our long-range plans was our use and investment in technology, systems management, and intelligent transportation solutions. $133 million over the life of the plan, funding 34 projects. And again, these are project types like retiming signals, adding turn lanes, improving intersection conditions, and again, funding that demonstration program for transportation innovation. A lot of project needs here and also unfunded needs, something to call attention to as we look at investing in technology. Again, some projects in our tourism area, our visitation area as well in Osceola County. And again, some of our regional annual programs, you'll see there, the retiming and the vehicle demonstration programs. The next one is bicycle and pedestrian and trail. So this is our active transportation needs, $108 million over the life of the plan, funding 13 projects. So these are mostly filling those critical sidewalk gaps, but also filling in some of those critical gaps of our regional trail system, our shared use path system. So we're funding key elements of the Shingle Creek Trail in Osceola and in Orange County. I mentioned the sidewalk gaps program earlier. There's the E.E. Williamson Road Trail project, provides connectivity over I-4 and connects Longwood. And then rather the last category that I'm going to talk about today is regional transit. And within this plan, $2.45 billion worth of local, state, and federal investment. And in the projects include in our needs assessment, looked at existing services, identifying new services, enhancing existing services, and also looking at some of those premium connections. Where can we provide a really high quality, high frequency trip? That's part of our needs assessment. But as we look at what we're able to afford based on existing revenues in the regional transit arena, is operating links at existing operations. That's what is affordable based on existing funding sources. We're able to fund existing service considering inflation into the future. Same thing goes with Sunrail. We're able to afford Sunrail service at existing operations. This plan also focused on transportation infrastructure. So not just the traditional projects, but also for transit, we looked at the operations infrastructure and documented need, but also we're able to fund a northern and southern operations. This will provide some relief to the links, main operations off of the Princeton John Young area. We're also able to afford parking expansion at some of the Sunrail stations, Meadowwoods, Tupperware, and Point Siena. So that's also cost feasible given our availability of capital funding. And we're also able to provide the capital or construction funding for Sunrail Phase 3, but we do not at this time have in our forecast availability for operations and maintenance funding. So that project is actually what we call partially funded because it doesn't have the other element of funding available to provide the actual service. Those projects are on table 15 of our cost feasible plan. So again, long-range planning, cost-feasible planning is really all about looking at the money we have, prioritizing needs consistent with what we say is most important, and then coming to the conclusion at the end of what we have unfunded and how we move forward to accomplish our unfunded needs. There are solutions to this, and this is, God, I'm not the end of the day. There are ways to overcome our unfunded needs and challenges. As we look at the plan, $16.5 billion worth of unfunded needs, about 3 of those in the toll arena under our federal state highway system, just under $1.5 billion. And we see a lot of locally funded and locally funded transit needs. And this goes just going back to the need for some type of transportation funding source that provides the necessary operations and maintenance funds to really serve and and accomplish our region's transit vision. So with that, I appreciate your time. I can answer any questions you may have. And to our board members that are on the TDLCB, we'll also be making a more detailed presentation of today at your board meeting next week. So thank you for your time, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Alex. I will ask the members who are online in Zoom or on the phone if they have any question of Alex. If so, please use your raise hand button and unmute yourself when recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see any hands raised at this point.
Thank you. And now, are there any questions from the board members here in the room?
I have a question. Alex, are you able to hear us?
Yes, Commissioner, I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. I wanted to make a note on the project that you guys assisted on, which is the Belle Isle, Orange County Hoffner project. And one of the things that we're facing right now is lack of funding for transportation on the local level. So although that there were some fascinating ideas brought in, how are we handling or offering options to help when there isn't the funds to actually implement this? And, you know, and it seems like it's not considered a main priority when you look at the scope of like what the county has identified as transportation issues. So just curious if you have any feedback on that.
Yes. So some of our challenges relate to how funds can be, Metro Plan Orlando, really charged with the expenditure of federal and state funds and prioritizing those funds. But we do what we can, when, funds are available and where we are able to kind of flex those funds to help our government partners. A lot of it, and you hit it on the head, is local funding is a challenge. We have the widening program that we identified, which follows kind of some state guidelines. So we're able to kind of tap into that because you're able to widen projects off state highway system using those fund types. But as we look to other types of improvements like improved transit, improved sidewalks, trails, there aren't necessarily, other than what we're already using, our federal funds. And if we go back, a few slides, we look at how we spend our urbanized area funds. We're spending 32% of our federal funds for complete streets projects. Over I believe like 20%. But it drops in the bucket when you look at the big picture of needs. Those are orchestrated through our local agency program. DOT calls it the LAP program. So we're identifying funds where we have the priorities, but we have significant needs and very finite funding source. And that's where our challenge lies. And I think what's notable as well, Commissioner Uribe, is as part of this process, because of the exercise and activities Orange County went through as part of the sales tax initiative, we were actually able to identify a lot of needs in Orange County because your staff had already gone through those efforts to identify your needs across the board, transit needs, complete streets mobility needs, sidewalk and trail needs. So that's also why, we're seeing such high levels, of costs of needs. But they could be solved with additional funding sources. And as you're very well aware, those sources are available to local governments, to exercise through a few different approaches.
And I just have a follow-up question on the truck parking. How close are you guys to getting there? Because I don't know if you know, recently the county has increased semi-truck parking in residential areas from $35 to $150 per day because of the excessive truck parking that goes on. And I know you mentioned that, and that's been a problem for a while. Any light at the end of that tunnel?
A little light. Or what I can say, it's always an ongoing issue. But what's happening now, and I think where there's been progress made, some progress, and it's in our transportation improvement program, for a project along I-4 in the Sanford area, something DOT is exploring. But also DOT is looking at 4 other sites, throughout the Central Florida area, more specifically, really trying to get at a place. We know where the need is. Now we need to find where it's most appropriate. So this is where DOT and Metro Plan is part of this process. We're going to be working with your local government partners, both on the public works side, but also on the land use side, to make sure that we can find an appropriate place, but also a place that serves our our freight and commercial trucking needs. So DOT has identified funds. These are not formula-based funds. These are discretionary funds out of the National Highway Freight Program to explore through this project development and engineering study to identify site plans, kind of concepts for a few sites in Central Florida. So some light, but the devil's in the details, especially as we're trying to identify these large sites, to park these trucks in a growing and, as urbanizing area. So right-of-way costs are something, is a key consideration, but also, making sure proximity to the interstate highway and other, limited access system is a part of that. But the needs are greater than just what we can accomplish on the state highway system. What you're acknowledging is something that Orange County is also experiencing at the local level, and it's more of a long-term parking versus kind of what I would call federal hours of service parking issue. So these are the drivers, the operators, where do they park the rig, when they're near home, at home for those times off. And I know Orange County experiences in exploring that issue as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the member here present? And on Alex, thank you so much for your presentation. Guys, from somebody that in his younger years, I served for DOT for many years in South Florida, my younger lives. And transportation followed me, even though I didn't want it to follow me anymore, it continues to follow me. But I do say that any type of road project, the cost continues to grow every single year. Alex, what's the, are you still there?
Yes, sir. Yes, Commissioner.
Right now, what is the cost of a mile of a road?
Devil's in the details on that one. I can pull up the exact number. Just give me one second here. About 4 to 5 million. A lot of that has to do with right-of-way availability. Or Mayor Alvarez, pardon me, not Commissioner, rather. But 4 to 5 million. A lot of that has to relate to the right-of-way costs, environmental mitigation costs for stormwater. And other environmental costs are important. Does it include sidewalks, the width? So when you're talking just a traditional widening project, 2 to 4 lanes, could be up to $9 million. A new 2-lane road, about $8.5 million if you include all of those costs. And as we look to complete streets and kind of more multimodal projects where they have different types of elements, not just kind of going out there and adding asphalt, those projects, those complete streets projects are about $7 million a mile. Our long range plan actually does have some long range estimates for projects per mile. So if you check out that document, we do have, just for some offhand ideas on how much some of this stuff costs, that'll give you an idea. But something notable to answer your question on the flip side is it's only about $500,000 to, really improve intersection. So there's lower cost, higher yield solutions. And that's why we're really investing across the board, to try to solve our transportation challenges with some diverse solutions.
Thank you, Alex. I knew a little bit of that answer already. I just wanted to leave it on the table of everyone that's present in this meeting so they understand what is the challenge. We know that we're growing as a county, as a state, but the funding wise, it's just not feasible. And that's why it's so hard. And I commend everyone, Metro Plan and DOT, for the work that they do. And they try to prioritize those sections of roads that are top priority first, and then they have to move them into second in line. I know that because I see some of those projects that are for my city, my county, and it kills you to see them moving slowly, but we do understand. And I wanted you guys to hear those numbers, because that's a challenge. It's a challenge, and as elected officials, we never like to mention the word tax, but citizens need to understand that until we don't find that tree in the back of our city hall that grows money, funding has to come from somewhere. Alex, thank you so much for your presentation.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also call attention to, on this past Monday night, we held the public meeting, a webinar that was virtual for the reveal of this plan. And public comment period is now open. And as you are reviewing, if you have public comments, you can go to our website to make those public comments. This plan will be adopted by the Metro Plan Orlando Board at the December meeting on December 9th.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, this is Alex, and thank you, Virginia. I'm remiss to call attention to this. The public comment period does end on October, or rather November 20th. So please have all feedback. The slide that's on your screen, those are the different ways you can engage with us via email. We have a comment line if you just want to leave us a message. But check us out, metroplanorlando.org/draft2045 plan. Talks many ways to engage. So there's still time to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. A reminder, the next presentation has been postponed, so we will move to Mr. Hickling for a CTC update. So that will be item D, Community Transportation Coordinator update. Mr. Hickling.
Thank you, Chair and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And if it's all right, Lisa, I'll just have you, when I say next slide, if you wouldn't mind, you just change the slide and go a little bit quicker for everybody. So it's a pleasure to be here and give this report to the Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board here this November 12th. Next slide, please. So today we'd like to share with you on behalf of Mobility Services, just give you an overview over the last 3 months, what our trip performance and analysis has been, some funding allocation breakdowns, call center performance, eligibility status, and then some good things that we've done in the program status and initiatives that we've undertaken during this very unique time of COVID-19 and trying to maintain service at a top rate level. And then also, as Chair Baldwin had shared with you, we'll give you a very short status on the new transportation disadvantage application process and application form that we are working on with the community. Next slide, please. This is a top level chart, and we will break this down, but it gives you an idea of what we view on a monthly basis and we keep in front of us so that we can make sure that we truly understand the access links service that we are providing, how many people we are actually carrying, how many clients, individual clients we are serving, and knowing exactly what types of trips are being requested of us from the month that we're in, and then also in comparison to prior months. And then also we have an idea of the areas where the highest percentage of trips are coming from for that particular month. So we'll break this down in the next charts. Next chart, please. This one shows that you can see the impact. This is for the FY20 year. Goes from October of 2019 to September of 2020. In October of 2019, we were right at, and this is a pretty significant number of 62,801 trips. And you can see how we have had to adapt to a much smaller trip count. Whereas in September of 2020, we did 38,036 trips. Again, all related back to COVID-19. A lot of employment centers have been closed, unfortunately. Schools are still virtual in many cases, such as Valencia, UCF, Seminole State, etc. So that is a reflection in the number of trips and why the reduction. Next chart, please. We break our trips down by funding source. So out of that total that you just saw there, the ADA was just right at almost 23,000 trips. the transportation disadvantaged trips, right at 40% of our total trip demand, 15,139. And we have a few other trips like the where it says FA, that is our functional assessments. That was during that month was 114. We actually had a separate COVID-19 trip and service established during that time frame, where individuals who were asking to be tested for COVID-19 wanted to go to a test site, or for some reason had been determined that they had COVID-19 and they still needed to maintain service to a dialysis center. We were able to take them, and so we're real proud of that. We had to work very quickly to set that up, but there were 65 individuals that were able to take part in that service during the month. And again, we break it down. It lets us know when we look at DEM, that is demand trips. Those are ones that are called in, asked for, and made a reservation for. And again, for ADA, it's up to 7 days. For TD, it's 1 day prior. That was 22,000 trips. The subscription trips, these are trips that are established because individuals on a regular pattern, such as in employment and or going to dialysis, and they're on a regularly scheduled, same time, same days of the week pattern, and we can schedule those out. And so that way it reduces the amount of calls for our clients, but it also reduces the amount of calls coming into our call center. And then we also break it down into wheelchair and then those that are ambulatory. But you can see during the month, we compare, it's about 3,000 individual clients that we serve at any one time. Next chart, please. And again, we break the chart down into the trip type. And as it was talked about in the testimony that came in, how we recognize how essential we are. And this chart really shows that how important we are to many people's lives out there in the community. And we take that very seriously, you know, from a dialysis standpoint, medical standpoint, and then the employment. Even in this tough time, there's still a lot of individuals that are working. They need our service to get them there to work on time. And we take that very, very seriously. And we know we're keeping people alive. And in many ways, we look at ourselves as being part of that healthcare continuum, that if we weren't there to get them to dialysis, these folks would be in dire need and bad things would happen. So we know that, and we stress that to all of our personnel within mobility services. Next chart, please. Also wanted to share with you the funding allocation. And we were hoping that Mr. Darn was going to be here today from the Commission for Transportation Disadvantage, because they are in the process of changing the allocation formula for the trip and equipment grant. The current trip and equipment grant provides links a little over $5 million. That is evenly spread, as you can see in that green area down below. That is the amount of money on a monthly basis that we can actually draw off that grant funding. We draw 100% of what we're eligible for, which is at $423,345. We also wanted to show you exactly how much, based on our approved rate structure, that it costs. So the actual cost back in July was nearly $800,000. In August was less, was at $730,000 and a little more. And then in September, we actually had expenses of $735,000. So you can see there's a gap, and that gray area there really represents the generosity of the funding partners made up by the City of Orlando, Orange County, Seminole County, and Osceola County. And they are the ones that are providing those that difference of, you know, $312,000 on a monthly basis, so that we can continue to provide this transportation disadvantage service. So it's a real powerful testament to how the policymakers are committed to this program. Next slide, please. One thing we've had a lot of discussion about over the years, and prior to even my honor of being here, was the call performance. And this chart here will provide a little map of in a comparison between the number of calls that have come in month over month for 2019 versus 2020. In September of 2020, we had 43,039 calls that came in, which is 40% less than what we've had. And again, that's attributed to COVID and all the impacts that the pandemic has caused on trips, on employment centers, places of education, etc. So we have, we're watching this on a continuous basis because it's a real good barometer to see what our demand from the community is by the number of calls that are coming in asking for trips. Next chart, please. We further broke it down into the average answer rate from September 2019 when we had that 60, I think it was 69,000 calls. We were at 5 minutes and 34 seconds to answer. Here in 2020, we are a dramatic improvement, 1 minute and 14 seconds. But you can see the comparison of the number of calls. And one of the questions that did come up from the Quality Assurance Task Force, and a very good question, is how are we going to adapt as the demand starts to grow, as once we as a country get a handle on this pandemic, how are we going to handle that? And we've had a lot of lessons learned. We're on a new phone system currently that has helped us dramatically. Lynx is in the process of preparing for investing in a new phone system for the entire organization, which will give us a lot of features such as being able to tell you where you are in your queue when you call, being able to give you text messages to let you know where your ride is. So we are looking at technology and the lessons learned that we've learned and gained from this pandemic that we'll be able to put into force going forward. So actually, as the call volume goes up, we don't want that number from 1 minute, 14 seconds to go higher. And we want to meet that 3 minute goal that the board has established for us in our transportation disadvantaged service plan. Next chart, please. We further break down, and this is a chart that we look at on a daily basis. This is for the September timeframe. You can see their average speed of answer was 1 minute, 14 seconds. Our mobility services reps were on the phone with each individual on an average of 3 minutes and 14 seconds, taking the reservation, answering their questions, finding out where their trip is. So we had an average handle time of 4 minutes and 37 seconds. But you can see that was out of 43,000 calls. Out of about 43,000 calls, we only had a 6%, a very small number, abandoned. That's where the individual, they decided to not wait and hung up. So for whatever those reasons were. But we see these numbers as a great improvement. I'm very proud of our mobility services representatives and the supervision that they have. They've really made some marked strides. We've been working with them, and we continue to improve that process. And as we bring new technology on here at Lynx, we will then continue to improve this even with a higher call volume. Next chart, please. Another chart that we really study is, and this is again where we can apply new technology going forward. 26% of all calls coming in are actually for booking a paratransit reservation. Actually, the highest call volume for us is the estimated time of arrival. Now that is at 31%. That is something that we feel that we can do better with new technology so that individuals will be able to know exactly when a trip is arriving on their behalf so that they won't have to make that phone call, and we can maybe reduce that a substantial number so that we don't have, why is my trip not here? Where is it? I haven't heard anything. if we can somehow send a message, a voice message to somebody, if we have the correct phone number, if we have a good cell number that we can text them to say, your trip in your vehicle is now 10 minutes out or 5 minutes out. That would take a lot of the concerns that a lot of our clients in some cases have, because they haven't heard and they want to make sure that they're going to be picked up in the time that we have allotted for them. So we look at this, we look at this on a monthly basis to see how we can really improve. We get a lot of phone calls that come in asking about our fixed route system. A good number of calls coming in about eligibility and the neighbor link. And then customer relations, we have a separate line for that too. So it really gives a good breakup of all the different types of calls that come in, the questions that are asked, and we make sure that we are also very much equipped to be bilingual so that we serve this community. Next chart, please. This chart represents our eligibility. In September, we had 12,677 clients that were both TD and ADA that we are serving. We break them down into ambulatory and wheelchair because that has that helps us schedule and make sure we have the right vehicle for those individuals. And it just tracks how many American with Disability recertifications that we have coming in. We have the ADA new applications. We had 158 of those in September of this year. The transportation disadvantage new applications, we had 98 of those, and then the transportation disadvantage recert, we had 81. So we track this. We see that you know, as people get more comfortable, they're going to get recertified. Something that I'll talk about in a little bit here, but on the recertification process, especially for the ADA, with all the work that we're doing on the transportation disadvantage, and I know this is something that Chair Baldwin has been very forceful and very a great advocate for, is streamlining that recertification process for ADA, especially for those individuals that have that permanent disability. We don't need to send them through the same old process that we might have to go through with somebody who is ADA new. So that's on the forefront of everything that we do. So we thank Chair Baldwin for continuing to be that advocate for that process. Next chart, please. Just some of the program status and initiatives, things that we have done and are very actively engaged in. As I showed that chart a little bit ago about the trip and equipment grant funding and the amount that actually we can invoice to the grant versus the amount that we actually spend on a monthly basis. Well, the Commission for Transportation Disadvantage is in the process of going through a new funding allocation formula. That language is being written into law. It still needs to be adopted, but we're not completely sure exactly how it's going to impact us. So we are watching it very closely, and hence we're going to be very interested. And I know MetroPlan has been a part of the workshops, as has Links, and we're going to continue to watch this very closely. And hence, I really appreciate the fact that we made the executive director of the CTD back so that we could have a discussion with him so that we can see what that impact may or may not be. We are putting in a new citizens request software. This will help us capture any concerns people have, comments that they might have, and compliments that they have. And we want to make sure, and this is going to be a system-wide for all of our different modes of service, from fixed route to NeighborLink to paratransit and TD. So somebody wants to make a comment, we can get it to the right person. We can get them an answer in a much quicker and a much more efficient manner. And so we're looking forward to that software. Talked a little bit about the phone system and building upon the MSR remote experience. You know, one of the things when this pandemic really gripped the country in that March timeframe, the first things that we recognized that as an essential function within this community, that we needed to take care of our ability to maintain that service and continue that service throughout, whether it was a month-long pandemic or if it's, ongoing like it has been. So the decision was made to have all of our MSRs work remotely. We put in a new phone system in a matter of 2 weeks, working very quickly under emergency powers. But we were able to get them so they could stay home so that they could be safe. But as importantly is that while they're safe, they can show up for work every day, answering phone calls, taking reservations for all of our clients out there, which again, just absolutely depend on our service. We could not miss, we couldn't have half of our employees out of commission because they contracted the virus and not being able to work, or we would have had a suffering, a community that would have suffered because they couldn't make those reservations. And thank goodness we worked in a fast period of time, got that done. And knock on wood, we were kept everybody safe, but as important, like I said, we were able to keep our service, never turned down a trip to anybody during this whole pandemic, and we moved people where they needed to go. So we're very proud of that part. But with that experience, we also looked into, because now we're buying that new phone system, we know what we want in a very solid communication and reservation system. So that lessons learned, and if there's good that comes out of the pandemic, we're able to now put it into the procurement for a new phone system. So when moving forward, we're going to have a much better customer experience for everybody. We continue social distancing on all of our trips, trying to minimize the number of people on any one vehicle at any one time. We want to minimize that exposure. That's why we're still requiring everybody to have a mask on. As the mayor had put down in his emergency order, our drivers, they all have masks, they have the gloves on, and if they don't, and we've had a couple times in cases past where one of our clients has called us and had a concern about that, and we got on it right away, and we made sure that those operators were canceled to make sure that they were wearing their masks during operations. We even implemented temperature checks at our paratransit base of operations. So anybody coming in was going to get their temperature checked, they get a wristband, so that we know that day they didn't have a fever, and we have good confidence that we're not putting anybody at risk, and especially our clients who we know are very, very, in some cases, very vulnerable out there in the community. So next chart, please. Wanted to brag just a little bit. Picture shows one of our new NeighborLink vehicles. So we will be following up, obviously, with Ms. Reese, who had the comment there in person talking about the NeighborLink system. But we have 15 brand new NeighborLink vehicles out there. So we've gotten rid of all the old vehicles. So these are spotless. They are all brand new 2020s. And actually the numbers here, we just got an order. We now have 30 new paratransit vehicles and another 6 that have been delivered to us, but we're going through the DMV process, getting the tags, getting the license plates, etc. And that is out of the 36 vehicles that we have ordered currently. So we are really making strides to update our fleet and improve the fleet, which will help us with maintenance, but also help with the customer experience. Next chart, please. Next chart, please. Well, anyways, the next chart didn't come up, but there we go. As Chair Baldwin mentioned earlier in her report, we had created a task force, a working group. A lot of great ideas came in from that. We looked at best practices, household income verification methods, financial resources. And so that has all gone into formulating a brand new transportation disadvantaged application, which is going to be much better. It will be separated from the old combined application. So now going forward, we'll have one for ADA, we'll have one for TD. It wasn't quite ready internally here at Lynx for the vote in front of the Quality Assurance Task Force. We asked for that indulgence not to present it at the time, but it's not taking away all the good work that had already been done and will continue to be done. And we're 100% confident we will have all of our processes, all our training that we need to do in the 2 new applications ready for a vote on the next Quality Assurance Task Force in the last part of January 21. Yes. Wow, how time flies. And then we'll be bringing it to this board in February of next year. So that is my report on behalf of Mobility Services. And again, thank you all for your time and insight on all we do.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from our members online for Mr. Hickling? If so, please use your raise hand button and unmute yourself when recognized.
Mr. Chairman, we have a raised hand from Ms. Marilyn Baldwin.
Go ahead, Ms. Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really want to compliment Mr. Hinkling on the report, the graphs. They're easy to understand. I think there's something that if we need to show this to an elected official, it's something that we can be proud of, and I'm very pleased with that. And really also want to thank you again for all the work that you've done to help our clients, to help members of our community to be safe and to receive life-sustaining trips. As we've gone through COVID and as we're beginning to transition back, job well done. And as he said, we look forward to working together with the TD application group and to bringing you back a product that you're going to really enjoy and that will be better for our riders. So good job.
Thank you, Chair Baldwin. And it's, you know, I have the fortunate opportunity of being surrounded by a greater team here in Mobility Services. So the credit will be passed along to them, and it's deserving of what they do each day for our clients. So thank you.
And also kudos to Ben and I think it's David Frankie. I gave them a Herculean task. I found an ADA update of all of the requirements under ADA and asked if they could please put this in an accessible format. And David has done an outstanding job. So thank you for doing that as well.
Marvelous. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the board members here in the room? Seeing none, thank you so much for this great presentation, Mr. Hinkling, and please send our thanks to your staff, also our links, for the great job that they continue to do every single day.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
This concludes our presentations for today, and we'll move on to item A, general information. There are 2 general information items in your agenda for your information today. Item 9, member comments. Are there any committee members who have final comments? Please use the raise hand function and unmute yourself when you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not seeing any hands raised on the Zoom side. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Ms. Baldwin has raised her hand.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, but I really cannot forget to thank the staff of MetroPlan that helped us with Blind Americans Equality Day, October 2020. It was fantastic. We did it virtually, but it could not have been possible without Virginia, Lisa, Cynthia, and Gary, and the host of other community partners, our commissioners and mayors like yourself that really stepped in. And the whole idea of this event is to, number one, talk about awareness of mobility needs of persons who are blind and physically disabled as they're crossing our streets and highways, and then to talk about the accomplishments of folks who are blind. And I think just really want to thank MetroPlan, Miss Virginia and her staff for doing an outstanding job. Lynx was also one of our partners, and we thank them for what they did also. And I promise that concludes my comments.
We have no other hands raised on the Zoom side, Mr. Chairman.
Any comments here in the room? I will move on to item 10, which is public comment. It is now time for general public comments. If any member of the public wishes to make comments, please use the raise hand function and you will be recognized, or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We'll unmute your mic. After you're recognized, please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 2 minutes or less. Are there any comments at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I do not see any hands raised among the attendees on the Zoom side.
Are there any in person who wish to make comments of a general nature?
No, Mr. Chairman, there are no public comments.
Are there any written or phone comments that were submitted before the meeting?
Mr. Chairman, we did not receive any written or phone comments for this portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Whittington. I will give my final comments. Today is my final meeting here at the Transportation for the Disadvantaged. It has been an honor to serve this board for the past 2 terms. Truly, it has been. You know, I've always wore 2 hats. For over 20 years, I wore a hat as a real estate broker in the real estate industry, and 8 years as an elected official. In those over 28 years, I've served in hundreds of boards from local, state, and national level. And I can tell you that this board has been one of the closest and dearest to my heart. I want to thank Virginia and the staff at MetroPlan, because really they make it easy for us as elected officials to serve. But I especially want to thank you, all the members of this board. And I want to leave you with this last thing. Remember that as you serve this board, you are advocating for the most vulnerable citizens in our region. And I thank you for that. Ms. Whittington?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is the last meeting of the board for this year. So if you all would indulge me for just a moment, there are some recognitions and some thank yous that are in order. And also, if you came into the meeting just a little bit late, I do have validations for your parking, so please see me before you leave. But thank you to all of the members who are here in person this morning. We needed you to be here, and so we thank you for your commitment to come out and participate so that we could conduct this meeting. It was very important that we had those agenda items that were for approval to be adopted today. I hope that we've been able to conduct this meeting in a way that has made you feel safe in participating in this. I want to congratulate Ms. Berry on her reappointment today. We look forward to continuing to work with you. Also, Mr. Wayne Olson, thank you for stepping up and chairing that TD eligibility application committee. Although we didn't get that action on the agenda for today, all is not lost, as you heard Norm say. And so those members who participated, we say thank you. We will see that action again in February. Also want to recognize Marilyn Baldwin and Dr. Linda Silverman. They attended the Florida Public Transportation Association virtual conference last month. This was a 2.5-day event, and each time that I went into one of the virtual rooms, I scanned the room and there was Marilyn and there was Dr. Linda. And so I want to say thank you for them and their time and for putting that on their busy schedules. Next, a recognition that we need to also bring forward is on October 4th, Marilyn Baldwin was recognized and she received the Legacy Award from the National Federation for the Blind. Ms. Marilyn's commitment to the disability community proves that she is very deserving of this distinction, and we are so very proud of her for the work that she continues to do to advocate for the disability community. Not just those members of the community who are blind, but all members of the disability community. And speaking of Marilyn Baldwin and the National Federation for the Blind, she mentioned that Metro Plan Orlando had the privilege of participating on the planning team under her leadership and in cooperation with our partners at Links and Lighthouse Central Florida and Best Foot Forward to host the first ever Blind Americans Equality Day virtual event. This was an experience, and some of the feedback that we've heard was that the event was fun, it was engaging, it was entertaining, and it was insightful. People actually participated from as far away as Pennsylvania. And so we want to congratulate Ms. Baldwin and all of her partners for putting on such a great event. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Chairman, we do want to thank you for your leadership on this board and over the past 2 terms. I know that the Metro Plan Orlando board will be acknowledging you next week for your service, but we wanted to thank you here today for your contributions to the disability community and for all of your service and leadership that you have done on this board. So thank you.
All right, item 11 is upcoming meetings of interest. There's a list of upcoming meetings and events of interest. The 2045 plan reveal was held earlier this week. I hope that by receiving the announcement in your agenda, you were able to participate. Metro Plans Orlando's board meeting is next week. They too will be conducting their meeting in a hybrid format. The next meeting of this board is February the 18th. No, the 11th, right?
This board will meet February 11th, yes.
February 11, 2021. And if there's nothing else good for the order, this meeting is now adjourned. Take care.
I'm sorry, may I just say one last thing? Just because we can't hug or shake hands or do anything, can we just have a little clap just for the service that everyone has provided? And
can we see some online claps from those of you on Zoom? There we go, yay. That was very much in order. Thank you, Joe.
All right, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Thanks for putting this together.
Thank you.